This week we're finishing up our Veterans Day, Veterans Month, really, theme of war movies with We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson, who portrayed.
We have a Mel Gibson sandwich this month.
That's true. Yes, that's right. Because we watched Patriot in the beginning, and now we're ending with We Were Soldiers, both starring Mel Gibson. And so, yes, We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson, who portrays Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore. He was an army officer who kind of helped revamp the cavalry within the army. No longer using horses, but using helicopters to transport men in and out of the battlefield. And he led one of the first actions within the Vietnam War when basically we took it over from the French.
That was when it first actually became the Vietnam War, I believe.
Right. Yeah, because I think
before we were just helping out the Vietnamese as far as like training troops and such, and helping them to combat against the communists.
Right.
And it wasn't until about that time that the movie takes place, is right about like when it was it became a war.
Right. Yeah, and I think even
because we started coming to Vietnam in, I think, 1959.
Yeah. Way earlier than people would
realize.
Realize. And I think even colloquially, God, tongue twisters. Before it wasn't just known as the Vietnam conflict.
Right.
Because we weren't actually engaged with them, but as soon as the North started saying that they're or like the leadership of Vietnam started saying like, oh yeah, I think we're gonna give communism a try, and then that's when we have to be like, oh whoa.
Yeah, and, it was this movie, all the characters are, very, man, it's a huge star-studded cast for one. We got Mel Gibson, Sam Elliott, John Hamm.
Wait, John Hamm's in this movie?
Yeah, John Hamm's in the movie. A very young John Hamm.
Who did he play?
He was one of the officers that he was training.
Okay, in the beginning?
Yeah, but he was throughout the whole movie.
Oh, okay. I don't remember John Hamm being in this movie.
Yeah, I didn't remember that when I didn't realize that when I first watched it, but going back and seeing it again, I was like, oh, John Hamm's in this film. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah. And there's a lot of future. There's a lot of future stars too, like Clark Gregg. He was in that. He was in that too.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's funny because I can't remember all of the roles that I've seen him in, but from this movie into the first Avengers movie, there's like a bit of a pattern where he unexpectedly dies.
Yep.
Yeah, because in this movie, he's him and one of his buddies are injured, but his buddy is more injured. He's like, no, you take the spot in the chopper. He's like, yeah, I'll see you on this other side, and then he gets shot, through the heart, in the back.
Yep.
And then in Avengers, he gets killed by Loki by getting pig sticked.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say my personal favorite character in this. I love Sam Elliott's character.
Yeah.
There's a point where the battle is not going very well, and Mel Gibson's character, he was talking with Sam Elliott's character and saying, it's like, I wonder what was going through Custer's mind, when in The Last Stand, he's like, sir, Custer was a fucking pussy.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Elliott plays the grizzled, veteran.
World War II vet.
Yeah, World War II vet, Korean vet. he
It's
had
like, and
he had four combat, because uh, Sam Elliott's character and Mel Gibson's character are both paratroopers, and so like if you're able to do 3 combat jumps, you get like stars on your jump wings, and Sam Elliott's character did 4 jumps,
yeah,
4 combat jumps. So he was like he's like in really rarefied air, and so like his kind of like toughness is kind of understood because he did 4 combat jumps, and
and
he's
he
fought in 2
refused to use.
wars up
Yeah,
until
he
that
also
point.
refused to use the M16. He's like, it's a fucking piece of plastic. I'm gonna
Yeah,
stick
it
with
feels
my
like a
pistol.
BB gun.
Oh,
Yeah, and
it was the
it's
best.
funny,
I
just
mean,
like the interaction that he has with like some of his subordinates, like another he's a sergeant major, which means he's like that's like the highest rank an enlisted person
the
can
enlisted
achieve in
thing,
the
yeah.
army. But like they have like this him and one of his subordinates, like another sergeant. They're like they cross paths, and then like the younger one is always like trying to start get on good terms with them or whatever. So it's like, oh, good. It's like, good morning, Sergeant Major. It's like what's so fucking good about it?
Yeah. It's like, what are you, a fucking weatherman?
Oh yeah, it's like, oh yeah, and the other exchange is like, oh, beautiful weather. It's like, beautiful day. It's like, how do you know what kind of fucking day it is, you weatherman? But yeah, but yeah, it's just like so Mel Gibson's character, the actual real person of Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, he's tasked with revamping the cavalry and coming up with all these new tactics, to use in conjunction with the latest technology, which is the helicopter, the Huey helicopter, and and so like I'm a sucker for training montages, and so like there's a training montage, um, and he's also like learning about the enemy, the Vietnamese, and just like there's like all these parallel to they kind of keep making these parallels to Custard, and funny enough, just before there's
he's a history guy, so he
right, yeah, he's a
studied
history
history of
guy,
battle warfare.
right, and interestingly enough, like just before they get deployed, the army cuts his men to like about a third, and they renumber his unit to the 7th Cavalry. And for anyone who's up on history, or specifically American history, knows that the 7th Cavalry was Custard's cavalry.
Yeah,
And he was kind of similar, kind of like foreshadowing, or the what's to come. Custer was massacred, because he had low numbers, um,
yeah,
and
and
kind
I
of like
think
what they were about to face with against the North Vietnamese.
yeah. And and overall, like I really liked Hal Moore, like the way Mel Gibson portrayed that character. He was very thoughtful. Kind of we've talked about this where he's I don't know what it is, but Mel Gibson tends to play in these like war films that he's in. He tends to play the family guy, the religious family guy, that is very thoughtful, calculated. Um, in his studied the history of warfare, and it was just very interesting. And so he was thinking like, oh crap, like now I'm the 7th Cavalry, like and we're going into a place where we don't know the terrain, we're outnumbered, and it's very possible that we're not going to make it out of this. And it's the whole movie is kind of ends up in this like it's this one battle, this one part of the conflict, and they are nearly wiped out, but it's through just sheer like smarts and willpower that they were able to make it through.
Right. Yeah. It was just like complete, like, they like willed like, the victory to happen. Um, and what'd you think of Barry Pepper's character, the journalist?
I liked him as a character.
Mm-hmm.
I because I think he was trying to do like he had his lineages. He has a lot of soldiers that in his family line, and he says like they all fought and for this country, and it's like now like I still want to do the same thing, but I also want to understand maybe why wars happen, and I want to be able to capture on film like what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up getting dragged into the fight anyways. But I think
Right.
he also, so he saw it kind of in a unique way, the conflict in a unique way, where he was fighting alongside these guys, yet he also um, was capturing the footage. And I think,
Right. I thought it was a pretty interesting.
because technically he was the one that was narrating the film. It
Right.
was
Right. Yeah. He
this was
was.
his story that he was writing.
Yeah. He was. Yeah. He was like, and like, he even gets tasked by Colonel Moore to like, oh, tell our story. Tell this. Tell what. Tell the people what these men did here.
Yeah, because he had
And
no idea. It's like he's like, what do I do? What do we do now?
yeah.
And the he's like, well, tell our story. Tell these
Right.
people's story that we lost today.
Right. Yeah. Because
Tell the sacrifice that they made.
right, because it's all because that initial battle uh, is a bit of a Pyrex victory, because we lost so many men that it might as well have been a loss, but we were only the Americans were only able to prevail because of superior technology.
Right.
And so, like, and then even the North Vietnamese colonel, the one leading the attack against them,
Who was
I
also a very wise person too. He
yes,
was a very skilled tactician.
right. Even he came out, after like they had left and like they were collecting their dead. He was saying like, oh, they're gonna consider this a victory, even though they lost so much.
Right.
And so I thought it was I thought that was really interesting. And I
Yeah.
think,
He,
yeah, like, but going back to Barry Pepper's character, the journalist, yeah, when the sergeant major, like, gives him a rifle and some ammo, and he's like, oh, I'm a non-combatant, and then, he was like,
today you aren't.
yeah, there's no such thing today, and he kind of he puts down his camera, and then he's forced to engage in combat, and it takes a toll on him. Because there's like that
As it
point
does
where
today.
he's like firing the rifle and he realizes this isn't why I'm here. And then like like he kind of turned around, like there's his camera like hanging off the off a tree limb, and he puts down his rifle, and he grabs his camera and starts taking pictures. And I think I think as much like chaos and turmoil he was going through, I think that was the moment you know he finally understood war, like to a point where like he could start like documenting it again, like really documenting it, and not just
Right.
like hey, like ain't this like initially
He wasn't some
when he got
casual
there, he
observer
was
anymore.
making friends and like snapping pictures of soldiers like kind of smiling or whatever.
Right.
But like now, after he's like he's held a rifle, he's fired, he's killed some people. I think he was able to really document it, the war as it should be documented, not just like these heroic young men fighting, but just like the death and the suffering that goes with war.
Yeah, it's like because he was no longer just a casual observer. He was now
Right.
like he understood it. I think because that was his goal. It's like I want to understand why this stuff happens, and I think by being in it and being kind of a part of that conflict or in that battle, I think he learned about like what the sacrifice that it takes, and it's yeah. I think he would. It taught him what he was looking for.
Right. Yeah, because he might have been in it, but he wasn't in it.
Right.
And that experience just gave him the insight for him. Like even though he admits like he doesn't know how to tell the story, but I think at a very deep level when he started when he put down the rifle and picked up the camera again, I think at a very deep unconscious level he knew what he knew how to document it. But then
Right.
like but then to like when asked that to tell the story, he's like, I don't know how. It's like, well, and then he was like, and then Mel Gibson's character was like, well, you have to find a way.
Yeah. I think the other thing that is important to note as well is that this movie also showed the battle at home as well.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's
Particularly with like
obviously
the
like
wives.
right, and because I mean obviously like yeah, the soldiers are involved. They're the ones in a battle and are potentially losing their life, but it does take a toll on the home front. All these guys are sons, brothers, husbands,
Fathers.
yeah, fathers, and um yeah, it definitely takes a toll on the families back home, especially when they do lose someone in the battle.
Right. And
Um,
I think yeah, you know, uh, what was it when they start when the army sent taxi drivers to deliver the telegrams, letting the wives know that their husbands had died.
right,
Um, the wife to Colonel Moore, she took it upon herself to go and notify all the wives. And she
right,
she even says like, oh, the army wasn't ready. That's why that's why they didn't send a chaplain or a counselor with these emails because
right,
they weren't
right,
ready. They weren't expecting the 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 casualties to be as high as they were.
right. And so and kind of like it's a little bit of a duo because Colonel Moore was leading all those men in battle, and his wife was kind of leading the home front in
Right.
a
Yeah.
sense and caring for all the soldiers' wives and taking care of them.
Hmm.
So you kind of like see that the dynamic between
Right. Yeah.
him
And
and his wife.
there was like a complementarianism going on there.
Exactly. I think that was something else that's also very important to note about the movie because it wasn't just like, oh yeah, this is his wife, and so on. There was a point to showing that.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't like it's just she wasn't just at home like worrying over everything, but she took the steps to like organize them like initially and make sure everyone was taken care of. They had that little exchange. They had that little get together, and they're talking about like, okay, like where do we go for shopping? Where do we go for food? If the base supermarket doesn't have certain things, and they're just like kind of like networking
Right.
and that kind of thing.
When I think of this movie, because I remember watching this when it first came out in theaters back in, I think it was like what, '02 is when this movie came out.
About yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching this first thing in theaters, and um, it's a rough movie. But now
Mm-hmm.
it's like what it's years have like 16 years have passed, and I'm rewatching it again, and I see it in a little bit of a different light, but it's a tough movie. Yeah, it's kind of like when we were talking about the Gosnell movie. It's like good really isn't the right way to describe it, because I mean it's a impactful film.
Right. Yeah.
And I still had those same feelings that I did 16 years ago about the movie, where it's just like it's not a happy story. It's but it is I think it's a good story to tell, and it's just it doesn't
Or
necessarily,
it's an important story to tell.
right. And it's like, in one sense, yeah, Colonel Moore is comes back to his family, and that's good, but you still feel like it's not a happy ending.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
even
Because like most of his men died.
yeah, because even Colonel Moore would say, it's like, I have to face the fact every day that these men died following my instructions and my training.
Right. Yeah.
And
It's like he's like when he was talking to Barry Pepper's character, and he's like, oh, I have to live with it the rest of my life that my men died and I didn't.
right, and so you're kind of left like, he's home and he's happy to be home,
mm-hmm.
but it's not a happy ending. It's
right.
not
it's not like
kind of it's a rough ending.
Right, because most of his men came back in like body bags with flags draped over them.
He did fulfill his promise. He brought everyone back.
That's true.
Whether dead or alive, he brought them back. But it's just so yeah, good's not the way I would describe it. I don't even know if there is a word to really describe that type of like movie. Yeah, it's what would you give as a rating, Andy, or if you have any other thoughts to share about the film?
Well, for my rating, I give it a 3.5.
All right.
Yeah, I give it a 3.5. Because again, this is a rough movie to watch. This isn't a rah like, let's punch a gook in the face kind of movie. It's
this isn't like, woo, America. It's
Even though
like
you
Saving
do
Private Ryan, you kind of feel that, like,
punch a Nazi.
Yeah.
But this one's just like, I mean, it's like you're great. You feel a sense of gratitude for like the men who fought, and for the ones and then also died. But it's just like it's not that same kind of American spirit where you're just like clapping along.
But yeah, so I would say, like, my rating for the movie is probably gonna be the same, about 3.5. And I'm just not a happy movie. Don't look for the super happy ending in all of it, but I do think it is a movie that is worth watching, and I'm kind of glad to be able to go back and see it again through kind of in a more of an analytical way of watching it. And it was I think a good way to end the our Veterans Month. And but yeah, make sure to the veterans that are around you, go and give them a thanks, shake their hand. If you can help out veterans charities, there's some really good ones out there for guys and gals that that could use the help. And yeah, it was a good month.
Yeah, it was. Man, buy him a beer.
Oh, absolutely.
Buy him a beer.